Do you like dominatrix? Maybe a little sexual asphyxiation? Well, have I got the lane for you? Welcome to top lane. Top lane, I think, is the hardest lane purely from a fundamentals level. Now, this doesn't mean it has the most impact simply because it's the hardest, right? But I guess that's probably the fucked up thing about it, right? It's a lot of risk and not a whole lot of reward. Now, firstly, you have to know about TP usage, right? When to use your TP, when to use it selfishly for your own lane, just TPing back to lane, or when to then do a TP and maybe you end up chunking out the enemy top laner and then you use your TP so that you have an HP advantage. Like there's little tricks like that, or maybe TPing down famously towards the bot lane to do a dive. So there are just multiple different things about TP usage just in itself, or you can even think in pro play. Oftentimes, TP usage is done from teammates calling over for you to use TP. And another shitty thing about it is that usually top laners get blamed in pro play from the community when they do a bad TP, even though it may have been like a team-wide call. They end up calling. I remember there was one game in the spring split where Huni ended up doing some shitty TP at the bot lane, and it didn't amount to anything. And the enemy top laner ended up getting multiple plates and just completely ruining TSM's game plan. But who knows if that was actually Huni's call to do that. And of course, with TP usage comes map awareness, right? You have to be aware at the lane states of every different lane and when you can possibly use your TP in that lane. Maybe another lane is pushed up super far, the enemy is pushed up super far and there's a ward behind them and they're like 3/4 HP. It's perfect time to do a TP, right? And then you have to then end up communicating though to your team that you're going to be TPing, right? So it requires a lot of communication with the rest of your team, even in solo queue, right? Then, of course, you famously have wave management. This is one of the hardest lanes to manage the wave, and it's all on you, in fact, right? It's not like you're in the fucking bot lane and your brand support ends up pressing W on the creep wave and it just fucks over your entire lane state or whatever. It's like, no, like you are solely in control of your wave. And the shitty thing about that too is that if the enemy is better at wave management, it could be a huge advantage for them, right? So just the entire lane state and just the minion mechanics are very important for top lane, especially since it's the longest lane, right? So usually you want to have the wave pushing towards you so that you don't get fucking ganked by the jungler because, you're prime pickings up there. You're fresh fruit, you're the new fish. So, and then on top of that, you have to remember about 1v1 matchups. This is probably the most crucial thing about top lane is that if you don't know your 1v1 matchup, you're going to get super dumpstered every time because guess what? No one's going to help you up here. It's just you and it's just him. So if you don't know the interactions or even just the enemy's cooldowns and what his abilities do or the effects that it does it apply a slow or, does it do like extra damage or, how long is the cooldown for this ability? You need to know these different things or else you're fucked in top lane. And so I think that's to where it requires a whole lot of game knowledge, specifically in matchups and whatnot. And then lastly, and this is probably the most fucked up part, is that you need to know jungle timings. You need to know an entirely different role because otherwise you're going to get fucking ganked by the jungler. Meanwhile, in mid lane, it's a short lane. You don't really need to know, the timings of the jungle. Like you need to know red buff, when he's going to be at red buff and possibly if he goes to your lane. But then you just avoid that brush at that time. And that's really about it. That's all you have to do. Versus, bot lane, you always have wards because you have two people that can ward, right? And then you have top lane, you have one ward, and that's it. And not only that, you don't want to waste it too early because you should kind of know the timing of the red buff and maybe when he's going to be up there or, the blue buff, I guess, if he's going to be around that area. And so you want to save the ward, but maybe you don't. Maybe you want to place it because you want to trade aggressively in the very beginning, and the wave is pushing, so you kind of have to use the ward. So there's all this fucking shit going on because you have no vision, especially if you aren't in a winning matchup too later on in the game, to where now the enemy or you have priority. So that means that you have pink ward priority, which is very important for top lane. Not a lot of people talk about that shit, right? But pro or at least good top laners at least know that aspect about it, and it's one of the intricacies that a lot of people just don't discuss because, you know, not everyone plays top lane, I guess. Now, when you get zoned from the wave, that is probably one of the worst feelings when you play top lane. It's not even really dying is like the worst feeling, right? Even though it's like a 1v1 and it's all about skill and no one's interfering, so it is kind of just all on your fault, right? But you can kind of take that blame, right? But when you get zoned from the wave, it just feels fucking awful because you feel defenseless and useless. And for fuck's sake, jungle, you know, like he's shitting all over me. Just, it's hard to see, you know, purely from the scoreboard. It's like, dude, should I fucking give this guy a Blumpkin while we're at it? You know, like all the younger people, you go look up what that is. But I think this is the most understood aspect in regards to solo queue. It's that I can't actually even go up to the wave. Sometimes you can't even go up to the wave to get XP, which is the most important thing when it comes to top lane anyways, is XP. But, you know, say you can't get gold, you know, that sucks too, especially if you're a carry, if you can't get gold. And yet the jungler, your ally jungler, won't help you reset the wave or come gank because you're in a bad situation. And the wave maybe is pushing away from you. So you have to go into danger. And then you obviously don't have ward priority because the fucking other guy has the pink ward in there and he's going to challenge you if you fucking go over there and do it. So it's a big mess, as you can see, for top laner's life if he's not winning the matchup and he's losing so bad that he's getting zoned and he needs jungle help. That's I think the most misunderstood aspect in regards to solo queue. Now, top laners that pick an easily countered champion first pick, I think deserve to get shit on, right? It's like if you go into the matchup, you know, and I don't know, the enemy team has a Jace or something, and you're playing, I don't know, something shitty like a Darius or some shit. Like, I don't even know if that's a good 1v1. But anyways, point being is that if you do pick a shitty matchup, you know, early on in the pick order, which, by the way, the pick order, if you're, you know, like first pick for top lane, it's probably the worst thing possible in the draft. But that means that you just have to pick a champion that you're really comfortable on, that doesn't have a whole lot of counters, and that you can just kind of play safe. And also you're able to salvage the lane, you know, if you're behind anyways, or you're useful later on in team fights or something. And then, of course, you have the pro play side of things, which pro players, you know, in the top lane, they're often responsible for both initiation or flank initiation, which is even more common, right, in professional play versus in solo queue. And then initiation is pretty common for solo queue when it comes to a top laner, especially when we're talking about tanks. Now, this also means, too, that you might end up having to pick dog champs, you know, as Soaz famously referred to, right, where he would pick like Shen or Maokai every fucking game. So, you know, that has its basis in top lane of just having to sacrifice for your entire team to round out the team comp, so to speak. You know, you have famously players like Odoamne, you know, he's forever a fucking weak side player, right? He sacrifices so much for his team. And you'll notice this trend, right, to where it's mostly top laners that sacrifice their own picks for the entire team comp. You know, Impact, he's always playing weak side and he's always getting fucking dove 1v2 and he has to outplay it without any fucking help. Or like Dyrus, you know, famously always got dove, and TSM would just get things on the other side of the map and he would just be like, okay, I hope you guys got more than my death. And so that's how TSM played, and that's frankly things really haven't changed that much in terms of top lane players, other than, you know, the ability to kind of outplay a little bit more and whatnot. Now, TP usage in solo queue after laning phase, I think, is another underrated aspect because, you know, after laning phase ends, you have to be able to realize, okay, where are the objectives on the map? Okay, I'm going to play away from that because I want to draw the enemy top laner away from that objective as well, too. And then it's like, okay, so now I have TP to where I can get to the objective. That's the whole fucking point of TP. And I hate top laners that don't understand that because it's such a simple thing to know about the lane itself, or rather the role itself. So secondarily, you have, even before lane phase ends, is the enemy top laner going to Drake, or, say you're something like Jace, just keep pushing and take 3 plates. You need to be able to realize the actual importance of your TP, or maybe when to pressure the enemy to use their TP to go to an objective that really you could just give up the objective, and you just tell your team like, hey, I'm not going to be there. I'm going to get 3 plates though. So just chill out and I'll get a huge advantage from this. And it's a fucking Cloud Drake. We don't need it anyways. And then, of course, there is the flip side of that, right? The solo queue pusher that ignores every fucking objective in team fight. And, it's the fucking Tryndamere in the top lane that just keeps on fucking pushing, and he keeps on dying, and he doesn't fucking ward, and he keeps getting ganked, and it's just a terrible experience. We've all been in that fucking game before. Or, the Singe that just keeps on pushing and just doesn't give a fuck about his entire team. Like, obviously that happens too, to where people just don't understand the lane because they think it's a 1v1 the entire game for like 40 minutes, right? When it's really not. And then they don't use TP for the team. They rather use it selfishly for themselves to get back into lane. That's often fucking misapplied. And then there's the idea of knowing your 1v2 power when you're way ahead, right? Because if you're so ahead in top lane, one of the great aspects about it, and I think it's sorely underrated and oftentimes isn't applied, is when you're so strong, you're up like 4 kills, you're up like 50 CS. You need to realize that the enemy top laner can't even get anywhere near you. And in fact, you could probably dive him anytime that you wanted, right? And so obviously, this is probably at the time to where you're going to be able to take tier 1 anyways, and then you just keep pushing. And if there's another objective on the map, you just push hard, and they have to either answer you with 2 people because their top laner can't fight you, and if you get to him or get him under the tower, you're just going to fucking dive him and kill him, or he's just going to take the tower for free. Like, it's your choice. And so you put them in this rock in a hard place, right? To where they have to make a decision, either to send 2 people or to try and get the objective on the other side. It has to be one of the two, because you're going to end up pressing the issue. So this is one really cool advantage, I think, of the top lane, especially if you are far better than the enemy top laner. This is one role to where you could just completely take over the game and, once again, press the issue, right? And I think this role, at least for the very beginning, like the very early phase of the game, can create the biggest gap if you have high enough knowledge about the role. That's, knowledge about the 1v1 matchup. You have good wave management, jungle timings. You can destroy the enemy top laner just by that knowledge itself. You don't even have to have that sick of mechanics, in fact. You just have to know all these small intricacies, and you could create a huge advantage, right? You could create an HP advantage. You could create a minion advantage, right? Or a CS advantage. You can create all these different advantages, which then culminate into more gold or more experience or more tower plates, in fact. So this role, I think, by far has the biggest gap, at least in the very early stages of the game, right? Obviously, there's like mid lane can create a big gap, or jungle can obviously create a big gap too. But at the very start of the game, I think it's actually top lane that has the best chance to do that with a differentiation of skill between the players themselves. And since it's the most separated role and the longest lane, just be prepared to be left on an island, right? If you try and main this role, right? But also know how to lose gracefully. I think this is actually the greatest skill a top laner can have by far, because sometimes you may end up being first pick, right? And you may get a shitty matchup. And so you have to deal with it, and you have to know how to lose gracefully. And hopefully your other teammates can either carry in their lanes, or you can affect the map elsewhere, with a TP, or you can just affect the entire game in team fights, right? You have multiple different options. It's not that you have to win the 1v1, right? And so I think this is actually the most important skill. And referring that to pro players in the top lane know that, okay, I don't win this matchup. I'm just going to play safe. I'm just going to try and farm a lot, and I'm going to try and get away with what I can, and obviously try and keep my XP and whatnot. I might actually even get dove. So, they know when to call the jungler or whatnot. And so they have known how to lose gracefully. That's why there are so many weak side players anyways in the top lane to begin with. At least I think, is that because they know how to lose gracefully, they're okay with actually losing the lane so frequently. That's why they play the weak side. It's because they know how to lose gracefully. Versus other roles don't really know how to do that. That's looking at your fucking ADC, that goes 0-5 in the very beginning, and the support is like 0-1, just wondering what the fuck is going on with this ADC because he keeps on running in there or some stupid shit. Or the jungler that contests every fucking scuttle crab and ends up dying or something from a mid lane roam. So big ups to all the top laners that are the real masochists, that are, that love to lose the lane, that love to get zoned from fucking XP because your jungler don't go up there. So, kudos to you. You guys are the real heroes.